Hi, Maurice. How are you?
Camera. Hello, hello, testing, testing. Good.
Yeah, I know there were some technical difficulties to make sure we get these sessions started. Again, thanks, Maurice. Thanks for taking time to join us.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Perfect. I'm just going to record this session just so that everyone has an option to review it after this. Give me 1 second. Okay, so there it's being recorded. Okay, perfect. Cool. I think we are on time. So again, thanks, Maurice. Thank you for taking time to join us today. So these are a series of webinars that we currently are doing on different topics, bringing in industry leaders like yourself to talk about various topics. And this is a very interesting topic and topic that I've been doing a lot of research over the last couple of years in terms of AI, machine learning, some of these use cases that are very specific to recruiting industry and how these are helping recruiters, right? So this is a very interesting topic. I know you have a lot of experience in this. You've looked at various products, tools in the market, and you know some of these challenges that currently companies are facing and how these products are solving, right? So those experiences are what we wanted to, understand from you and get more information.
Sure.
So without much delay, just a quick introduction about myself. My name is Venkat Kulli. I'm the CEO at Oorwin. Little background about Oorwin for people who don't know much. So Oorwin is a recruiting platform. It's also integrated with the sales component, which is our CRM, as well as the HR platform as well. Without much delay, Maurice, please give us a little more introduction, and then we can get into this webinar as well.
Sure. I'm Maurice Fuller. I'm the founder of Staffing Tech conferences, and also run a site called StackVantage, which is a platform for finding products for staffing and recruiting. I am heavily involved in consulting with staffing firms to help them with their technology and to help them find the right technology to grow their staffing businesses faster and operate more efficiently. I've been in the staffing industry for over 25 years. Probably 20 plus years have been heavily involved in very advanced staffing technology. Also worked at executive level. Most of my experience in staffing firms has been in engineering and IT staffing, but currently I'm working with staffing firms in all segments, from commercial to healthcare, IT, engineering, professional, etc.
Perfect. Thanks, Maurice. Thanks for the introduction. I think without much delay, I want to get into some of these. There are few housekeeping items before we get started. So for everyone who have attended this session, you have an option called Q&A. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and put your questions in there. We'll try to address as many questions as we go during the session or after. We are trying to put in 15 minutes at the end so that we can answer any questions that anyone may have at the end. Also, these sessions are recorded, so these sessions will be available on our website, YouTube as well. So if you have to review these sessions, they are available there. Also we have a poll at the end. So if you are interested to look at our demo as well, please go ahead and request a demo at the end. Good. Perfect. So again, thanks, Maurice. Getting into, I think there is the most important thing that we want to discuss today is about AI and machine learning, right? So one of the biggest concern, especially pre-COVID, also was that that AI is going to take over a lot of these recruiting jobs that are out there. This has been a notion and concern for a lot of recruiters, especially when you ask them to use any tool right now, right? They would push you back and say, what, I'm happy with tools that I'm happy to do it manually. It takes too much time to use these tools. This is a general notion and a pushback that recruiters have been giving, right? So do you see this as being a challenge where AI is going to take over all these jobs from recruiters? Is this so can you share some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this. I've spent quite a bit of time thinking about this. And first of all, I would say anybody who's in recruiting today should be able to retire as a recruiter, even if it's decades from now. I think there's a lot of opportunity in the field of recruiting, but you have to be prepared for adopting to a lot of change that's going to happen along the way. But this is very positive change. I think what AI is going to enable us to do is actually focus more time on the aspects of recruiting that bring the greatest amount of value to our employers that we're working with. But also it's going to enable you to focus more and more time on the aspects of recruiting that are the most fun. So for me, when I was a recruiter, what I really enjoyed was working with candidates and being able to coach them or advise them on careers. I love doing that, and I've really, looking back, I helped change many, many people's lives and put them on better career and life trajectories through the advice that I was able to give them. Also, when you're negotiating with candidates for a position, that's a high value activity. So you're going to be able to spend more time negotiating and working directly with candidates. And a lot of the low level activities are going to be handled through AI and automation. So it's actually a really, really exciting thing that this AI is coming along to support us and enable us to work at a higher level of value added.
Very good, very good. So overall, you look at AI is enabling these all recruiters to be more effective rather than trying to, it's not looking to replace anyone's job at this point. Is that correct?
That's right.
A fair notion to have. Okay, very good.
Yeah, the job will certainly change. There's no question that the job will change as more and more automation is introduced. So as recruiters, we have to be flexible as automation takes on different parts of the job. That's essential to basically having longevity in this career path.
Very good, perfect. Thanks for that. Also, I'm sure COVID has changed lives for a lot of people around us. So based on what you've seen and spoken to people across the industry, how has people's lives changed in this industry, right? What were some of the impacts that you've seen during COVID time, and what has changed since last year and now? Where do you see some trends changing in terms of recruiting right now?
Well, there's a lot of things. I think, for one, recruiters themselves, for the most part, have been working remotely, and we can talk about that separately. But from a recruiting standpoint, the number one challenge that everyone faces is, as the economy is restarting, it's about finding candidates. Everybody in every segment of the industry is having challenges. Everybody has more job orders than they know what to do with. So I think we have, according to an Economist article I read just this week, in the wealthier countries in the world, we have 20 million people who are not working right now. That's a lot of talent that's going to waste. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. The consensus view is that it has to do with unemployment benefits, but I think it's a more complex situation than that. I think if you look at, for example, Australia, they took away the social safety net, but they didn't find that people necessarily went back to work. A better solution might be what is happening in Arizona. They ran an experiment where they gave a bonus for people who went back to work on a full-time basis. I'm not sure how that applies to us in the temporary staffing industry, but I don't think that the consensus view really summarizes what's really going on. It's a massive restart of our economy when people have been at home for a long time. And it's going to take time, and people, especially employers, need to be patient as we reintroduce people into the workforce. And a lot of people are shifting careers as well at the same time. So it's right. A complex situation that we're into right now.
Agreed. I think that's a big trend that we are all seeing. Is even if you go to a restaurant these days, there is hiring board everywhere now. We see that, right? So I think that's a big lack of workforce, people not going back to jobs. I think that's a big trend that we are also seeing right now.
Sure.
And also, I wanted to bring up one thing that's very close to all our listeners today is all our recruiters are working remote right now, right? So previously, working in the office, you would go, you have people you work around with, you would talk to them, meet, exchange ideas and thoughts, and talk about candidates and everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's changing in this world with remote working? Do you see recruiters working more remote going ahead, or is going back to office a reality in this industry as well?
That's a really great question. I think it's going to depend a lot on the staffing firm. There are staffing firms that were moving back into the office as quickly as they possibly could. And there are other staffing firms that have no intention of going back into the office. I think the biggest challenge has been for new recruiters and younger recruiters that don't have as much experience. They really can learn a lot by being in the presence of other recruiters and feeling the dynamics of what it takes to be successful. And trying to do that remotely has been really challenging. Now we have great tools nowadays. For example, we've got excellent voice over IP tools and excellent ATS systems that can help support that. But for new recruiters, there's nothing like being in the office and being able to overhear conversations and being able to participate in the presence of other recruiters. So I think we're moving into a situation that is firm dependent, and also is dependent on where you are in your seniority as a recruiter. Senior recruiters are certainly going to be able to work remotely, and we're seeing a lot of that. It also depends on the firm itself too. You have some companies like Twitter that have said that their workers never have to go back into the office. They're moving virtual. You have other companies, say Google, for example, they think it's important to bring people back in the office from a collaboration standpoint. Microsoft has said that people need to be in the office more than they work from home. So that would imply that they have to be in the office about half time or 20 hours a week. So I think we're going to see a lot of scenarios play out. But for sure, there's going to be a lot more remote work than there was before pandemic.
Perfect. Yes, I agree with you. So quickly, what we want to do is also spend some time today talking about some of the use cases that we see, especially in the recruiting world, specific to AI and machine learning, right? So based on, we as an ATS, we've, put a lot of thought into what all scenarios and how recruiting platforms can help recruiters. One area that we really see a huge advantage, especially is having an intelligent or a smart resume parser to start out with, right? Most of these candidates, most of the recruiters look for an effective parsing, right? Which is probably the entry point or the starting point. So, that's effectively used, one of the challenges that we see is data. Data is the biggest challenge. We want to understand a little from you about your perspective of how to make sure, like we, mostly as recruiters, how do you make sure you keep clean data, right? Make sure you have proper data that's available, accessible data that's there for you. Whenever you're trying to look for a candidate, what are some of the best practices that you can recommend on making sure you have clean data, effective data to make sure you're finding the right candidates fast, right? So can you share some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I'm also curious to get your experience as well, heading up, a large successful ATS provider, because you're actually in the thick of it. But my view is that, human beings, when they're entering data, will make mistakes. We're not perfect. And so your data will inherently have issues. And so, and in order for machine learning to run accurately and correctly, we rely on accurate and clean data. That's the foundation for AI. So I think best practice is that we have automations that run behind us that audit the work that we're doing and point out potential errors, or we have software that corrects issues, data entry issues, that is basically sitting behind us.
Right.
So I think that's where we're headed. I think is more and more software, and it could actually be AI that is running behind us to check the data and make sure that it is accurate. It doesn't necessarily have to be rules based. So it's some combination of those two technologies that are supporting us to ensure that the data remains clean.
Correct.
What are your thoughts?
So generally, we've spent so many hours trying to build up the platform itself. So we've seen that having a smart parser is very important because you can go and use any ATS platforms that are out there, right? Most of these ATS platforms that I've understood or realized are, they usually scan all these data, and generally tagging happens only on the name or email address. You get the basic information into the platform. But what we realized is, when you have to build an AI powered platform, you need to make sure you read all the content that's out in the data, right? And you put your tags and meta tags in the data so that when you're trying to look for it, you have a more easier and efficient way to do it. What's happening is, if you don't do that, so it probably is faster to load the data into your platform. But when you're doing your searches, the searches take a lot of time, right? So we do spend a lot of time. We've created a lot of models, tested with millions of data. So we see that being a trend is having a very good parsing tool is really important, especially if you're trying to do build your own good AI-based process and models. Data is the key thing, right? And having clean data is also important. We've run tests on thousands of resumes across, in multiple geographies. The other thing that we have seen is a format that's typical in the US is not the same that we use in India or, in the Asia Pacific or, other different regions, right? So when we read this data, what we've seen is the model itself is learning on its own because there are patterns that it looks at, right? For example, the way education is defined, the way, skills are defined. So it's very different in different geographies. So we see a big change in that whole parsing, process itself, right? So coming back to one other thing after that is, what I wanted to understand is, one of the most important thing, as an expectation, as most leadership expectation is that, as from recruiters, is that I give you a potential job order, right? Expectation is you find the best candidate fastest, right? So based on, I'm sure you've seen a lot of these tools that are out there. What are some of your suggestions on what's the best way to find, ideal ways to get these candidates fast, in terms of things that we need to do to be prepared so that when a job order comes in, how do we make sure we're very effective? So can you share some of your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a huge question that you just threw out, and I'll try to address that. It's heavily dependent on the industry that you're in and the dynamics of that industry. But let's just take IT staffing, for example. I think, and you mentioned parser. I think it's super important to have a great parser. I can't, that's fundamental and foundational to having a great ATS system is the quality of your parser. So we oftentimes want to start with our own candidate database. And that's an interesting area in itself, because what we're seeing just even within candidate databases, we all know that that we have a lot of candidates in there, but the moment the data is parsed into the ATS, it starts depreciating in value. So you have a lot of candidates, but a lot of the candidates are, their qualifications are out of date. So long term, what we're going to see is a more and more enrichment of the data within the ATS system to keep the data increasingly current. So we always start with our own database. And a best practice, of course, is to stay connected to the candidates that are within our database through emails and other methods to ensure that the data is as current as possible. And of course, we are always using job boards to find candidates. We have job postings to have candidates come in. We have referral programs to ensure a consistent stream of candidates. So we have a lot of different sources. And in my experience, different recruiters specialize in pursuing candidates in different ways and using different strategies and tactics. Increasingly, I think that, and we're going to talk about this, I believe, is virtual assistants are going to play a bigger and bigger role in engaging with more candidates at scale, so that we can reach out more quickly and more effectively to engage with potential candidates for positions. And I think along the way, and we're just talking about the candidate attraction part right now, along the way, as we move through the funnel, we're going to see more and more automations that are going to help streamline that process. Because as we all know, staffing is a speed game. We need to move very quickly, and the firms that can move the fastest are most likely to make the placements. So, in terms of other areas like skills assessment, we have better and better tools for assessing skills. We have virtual reality and we have interviewing tools now, so we can more effectively interview candidates, including the use of AI to assess candidates. We have better and better ways now to present candidates to the hiring manager and to work with hiring managers. So there's so many technologies that are coming along to support us at every point in the hiring process, helping us find candidates faster, better, and make better decisions, and also to present candidates more effectively to our clients that we're working with.
Very good, very good. I agree with you. I think an interesting topic that, on all these that you mentioned was candidate experience. I think that is a very important concept, scenario that we are looking at right now, because most companies are struggling to hire people right now, right? So as organizations, it's very important to attract, engage, candidates to come and retain, right? To retain all your candidates or employees so that, for your business. So I know you mentioned a little about virtual assistants. So based on, your experience and what you're seeing, the world is also changing because there are so many channels of communication, right?
Yeah.
Frankly, if you ask me, I used to be on my phone a lot, but these days I really don't spend a lot of time on phone. But there are a lot of these other channels, like the WhatsApp and the text messaging. So your channel of your mode of communication has changed, right? So based on what you've seen so far, what are some of these effective channels, communication channels that you see are very effective in communicating with candidates and keeping them engaged? I want to get some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So I think in the pre-screening phase, clearly the direction that we're moving in the industry is toward chatbots and conversational systems as new candidates come to us through different channels, whether it's job postings or referrals. We're engaging with them immediately through conversational systems. So typically, not so long ago, staffing firms worked normal hours, let's say 8 to 5, but now staffing firms can work 24/7, 365 through conversational systems that engage immediately with candidates as they flow into our organizations. We can qualify them, and we can determine how we want to engage with them, and then put them on a recruiter's schedule right away, so that at the moment, as soon as possible, we can have a human engage with them. So that's a big time saver, and it speeds up the process. So I think in that sense, when we talk about virtual assistants or bots, I think that's the biggest use case that we're going to see in the next couple of years develop all across the industry. I mean, it's already happening now, but it's going to be pervasive a few years from now. I think more and more we're going to have virtual assistants that support us as recruiters and work side by side with us to help us get our jobs done. But I can also see a scenario where we even have bosses or managers that oversee our work and are instead of going to a human boss, that we might go to a virtual boss, so to speak, that helps us coach us to success. So another trend that we're seeing is that managers have more and more direct reports because the software is handling more and more of the sort of the routine aspects of management. So that the boss is acting more as a coach to help people operate successfully within the organization. So it's an exciting period of work, I think.
Very nice. Yeah, thanks for that insight. I also a very important topic, a topic that I've been talking to a lot of companies recently too, has been the topic of diversity and inclusion, right?
Sure.
So this has been, so we recently did a webinar, and I'm also I've actually spoke with a lot of startups too in this space, who are really trying to focus on diversity and inclusion as a very important way to find people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So coming back to an ATS, and our perspective is generally every candidate is equal. And if you have to hire the right candidate, you just need to find someone who has the right skill, right match, and make sure they're fitting the role, right?
Mm-hmm.
But organizations have this important thing to be able to find, to have diversity and inclusion as one of their initiatives. So I want to understand from you, what is your thought on this, and how important is it for organizations? How do companies have to tackle this and make sure this is something that's included in their hiring process as well?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. And I think the answer is going to vary depending on the organization, whether you're hiring on an FTE basis or on a contract staffing basis, and certainly within the segment of the staffing industry. But I think the diversity hire and inclusionary staffing and hiring is really, really important, especially as we enter a time period where finding qualified workers is more and more challenging. Also, it's just the right thing to do. And so increasingly, we can use AI to help us identify candidates that fit in these categories, and to help bring these candidates to light and help get these candidates hired. At the same time, we have to be careful as we incorporate more and more AI and machine learning into our hiring process that we don't exclude these candidates and create biases unconsciously against these candidates. I have personal experience having hired candidates in this area, and in some cases it can be challenging, but I think it's an important part of what we do in the hiring process. So I think there's technologies that can support us, provided they're set up correctly, right. And there's also incentives that can be put in place to ensure that we're hitting the mark.
Right. I think it's an interesting thing that you brought up is, using AI. I think one problem that we probably can solve is bias, right? Because it's all system generated matching that happens. And imagine if you have a perfect candidate and you are trying to reject them by gender, by religion, by by any of these other factors, right? So it can be validated that that there is no bias, right? So I think that's very important. So a problem there I see is having that data is also important. Having enough access to people from diversity pools is also important to have. So coming back to having access to data, I know there are a lot of job boards that are out there. There's so much data floating around, right? On any individual, for any candidates and all. Fortunately, we see LinkedIn as being these days a core source of people. It's like more of a validation where you can figure out if the candidate is real, how much, if he's really there, right? So a lot of validation is happening on LinkedIn. A lot of companies that we talk to are doing that right now. I want to understand a little about getting these data from different data sources, right? There's all these job boards that are out there. Do you recommend, especially when a lot of these job boards also say that they have these AI-based job boards? What is your feedback on these job boards? How do you see things are changing from these job boards? Do you recommend recruiters to use more of the job boards to find candidates, or use LinkedIn or other sources to get more data? So I want to get some thoughts on that as well from you.
I think the key here is on selecting where to go. It's complex, and it's not just where you're making hires from, not just binary. These are the sources where we've made hires. You also want to look at the quality of the hire and think about, for example, how long is that hire staying on that particular assignment? And so there are relationships that we can establish between the sources where candidates are coming from and the quality of the hire. So generally speaking, what I see is that referrals tend to be higher quality hires in terms of performance on assignment and length of engagement on the assignment. So that being the case, we might want to invest more heavily in driving placements from referrals. We might want to up our incentives for driving more referrals. If we have job boards where the quality of the hire is not as high, we might want to de-emphasize that. But as recruiters, we're not necessarily tuned into those numbers. Even staffing firms are not necessarily tuned into those dynamics. But I think that's a new area that we need to look at through business intelligence and analytic platforms that we have in place. So whether the candidates are coming from your own database, whether they're coming from job boards, whether the job board is AI enabled or not, I think every segment of the industry is going to be a little bit different. So it's hard to advise globally on where to look for candidates, other than to apply analytics and sophisticated analytics to really analyze your sources and understand the outcomes from the different sources, and then invest in those areas where you're seeing absolutely the best results.
Right, agreed. I think it's a very interesting thing that, I know we spoke about data. One thing that I look at right now with companies is you have all this data right now. Mm-hmm. Companies are, they do, and even at a lot of customers at Oorwin, they integrate with job boards and they get all these data into their resumes, right? Mm-hmm. One thing I wanted to understand, a concept of, matching and scoring is what I wanted to talk about today, is because it's very important, because I look at it as what is very key, right? How do you find the right candidate fast, right? Once you have all the data, now you need to find that candidate, right? The right candidate. Right. So a lot of ATS platforms right now do have this feature of matching and scoring, right? So I want to get a little more understanding about your what you've seen in globally. There's every ATS have their own scoring models that are out there. They have their own way of matching candidates to jobs. Want to get some of your insights on why it's important to do this job scoring and matching, and how recruiters can effectively use that to make decisions faster.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the matching can absolutely speed up the recruiting process. If you can use machine learning to help make decisions about which candidates are most likely to be available for assignments, or most likely to succeed on assignment, or have the best skills, are the first ones that we should engage with, that can help us streamline our jobs and help us focus in on the right candidates. So I think these matching algorithms can be very, very helpful in helping recruiters do their jobs more efficiently.
Very good. Agreed. So, I mean, just to give you, I'll just give you my perspective, Maurice, here.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear your view.
Yeah, we see this being a big challenge, because a lot of customers that we talk to, recruiters spend so much time, because they go into into ATS platforms, they go into search, they put their search criteria, and then suddenly, they have like a list of 10,000 resumes that come out, right? And what happens is they are not really able to figure out which one is the right fit for the role, right? So that they spend a lot of time. Maybe if they have 1,000 candidates, they have to spend time with 1,000 candidates to try to find a guy who fits for the right match, right? So what's happening is the time being spent to find candidates is being higher. But using an AI-based platform, what it does is it's saving a lot of time. You probably don't need to reach out to 1,000 people, maybe reach out to the top 15 or 20 people, and then it saves time. The challenge that we see there is, you do not know who's available, right? So they may be the right fit, but you don't know what's available. That's a problem that we see, is a lot of our customers also face that. I think a mix there where I think a problem that the way this can be solved is passive engagement, right? Organizations, as they get ready, and staffing companies have they, if you think about how the future looks, right? It is not about just having recruiting companies don't just need more recruiters. They need to have the right people, the right tools,
Right.
and the right engagement process that should be there to be more effective. And even conversational AI is very important. We see this in this new world is and different channels, right? Channels of communication. I look at, if you're communicating with, especially me being a candidate, right? You either have to call me, you have to text me, you have to send me a WhatsApp, you have to send me, email. You should try to communicate in different channels, right? And also, if none of these are effective, you should try to get my attention through digital channels, right? There should be a digital marketing effort onto the candidate so that, if I'm a guy who's trying to look for a job, they need to effectively show me the right job so that I would apply. So we see a lot of AI use cases which are available in this recruiting world. And we always have to see this, that you have to start at one point, and I think it's always good to start at an ATS point. And then, because once you have that very clear and the right ATS, it's easy to build on top of it. That is my take is, you need to have that as a core.
Agreed. I think to your point there, I think the ATS remains the single most important technology decisions that staffing firms will make, and having the right ATS makes all the difference. You make a lot of really good points there about making sense of all of this data and be able to quickly hone in on the right candidates. And that's sort of the holy grail that you pointed out there. If we knew the availability of candidates of everyone in our database, we would absolutely crush it. Our jobs would be much, much simpler. But we don't have that data. There are ways to sometimes get a sense of whether somebody might be looking for a job. Sometimes people are updating their LinkedIn profile, and if you can get a signal that they're making changes there, or maybe a signal comes in from a job board that somebody's updated their resume, that can be super helpful. And that could, in your algorithm, could prioritize those candidates to the top. So there's a lot of work to be done there, I think, to accelerate and improve the staffing and recruiting process.
Agreed. So coming to your point on passive engagement, I think it's very important to for organizations to keep very frequent communication on with the candidates, right?
Absolutely.
A lot of companies do measure themselves with the amount of resume database or the access to candidates they have, but they never measure it with how many candidates have been engaged, how many people have they really touched on over the last 3 months, and how many people have actually shown interest and who are available for projects, right? So I think those are key metrics that need to be tracked. And I see organizations trying to get there. And I think it's very important to think about those aspects. And from an AI standpoint, there are some use cases there that we see as well. Yeah.
I think you're in a really unique position as a leader, for leading ATS, to be able to look at some of these best practices and really incorporate those into your system, because you can see what's working across a lot of different companies, and you can sort of tease out those best ideas and turn those into standardized technology solutions that are made available to everyone.
That's correct. Yes. Another challenge that I wanted to bring up today is, globalization has been a big thing right now, right? So we are trying to hire people working remote, be it US, be it in Asia, Europe, or Australia. People are working remotely for organizations, right? One of the challenges that recently that came up, and I want to get your thought, because I don't have a solution right now, is companies, recruiters have been asking these challenges. When they're trying to hire candidates, they do come across candidates who are in different geographies. How do they validate location, right? So it's a big question, because they probably call into a US number, the guy answers he's in the US, but how do you find the right location and the right of that candidate was a big problem that came up. So I want to get some of your thoughts and Have you seen this problem across other companies and how they have tackled this as well?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So more and more for IT positions, I think it's going to matter less where people are actually located, at least within let's say the United States. Within, in the past, I think it may have been really important for a position that was located in, let's say, Raleigh, North Carolina, that person is able to actually come into the office and do the work. But more and more, I think within IT positions, it's okay to have people who are like anywhere within North America, provided they're not North America, within the United States, provided they're on a US payroll. Now, as far as extending the geography into, let's say, North America, like Canada, Mexico, et cetera, that brings up visa issues. And then extending it out to a global basis, that creates more challenges from an employment standpoint, and how that would work. But clearly, the workforces are moving global faster than anybody could possibly have anticipated in the past. Now, to your point specifically about validating candidates, I have seen some staffing firms do this in a very, very sophisticated ways in terms of how they validate the location of the candidates. And there's a lot of proprietary methods that companies have developed to determine these things, including looking at passports and driver's licenses and validating credentials and so on, and also asking similar questions during the entire recruiting process to ensure that they're working with the same candidate throughout the entire process.
Right.
So there's a lot of techniques that have been developed in that area.
Yes, great. So I think that's a big change that we are also looking. Thanks for that insight, Maurice. Also, another interesting thing that we see is with millennials and Gen Z, one of the things that is happening in this whole recruiting our world is people are changing jobs so frequently. It could be even full-time jobs. I'm sure like many 30, 40 years ago, people would just come into a company and hopefully try to retire in there, right? But the new generation right now are changing jobs so frequently and so often. So how do you get to, especially, as a services company, as consulting and staffing companies, how do you make sure you are trying to keep them engaged with the organization? What are some of these challenges that you see with the new workforce that are coming out, especially with current existing process? Because, I'm sure it's probably working out right now very well because of existing models, but the workforce are also going to change because their intent to work is also going to change. There's also a lot of new opportunities for them because there's the freelancing work, that the Upwork is there, these job boards where they can get freelance work, right? So how is that affecting these new generations? And do you see that being a trend? How do service staffing companies right now prepare for that, for a successful transition?
Yeah, you raise a lot of interesting questions. So I think you're right. I think that the younger generations are staying at jobs for shorter lengths of time than the older generations. But this trend has been going on for a very long time, and the idea of permanent lifetime employment is a myth. People should be prepared for not just changing jobs, but also changing entire careers multiple times during the course of their careers, and at times having to retrain themselves because old careers are no longer valid. There's so many jobs that are going to become eliminated. Take truck drivers, for example. Millions of jobs, good jobs are just going to go away. So, and the same thing, as technology changes rapidly, you're going to see that in IT and so many other areas. But you also bring up the point about the gig economy. It's so interesting. Not only are jobs, length of jobs shorter, but also you see people taking on basically creating jobs for themselves out of multiple streams of gigs that they're doing. They may have 10 different employers with whom they're doing little bits of work, and they've created jobs for themselves by doing that and specializing very narrowly. And through the gig economy, they can basically build these kind of careers, and they can be really rewarding. So I think in terms of retention, how do we retain people? How do we retain recruiters and sales execs? And I think the key here is to ensure that we have a work environment that's great, that we have a really great company that we're working for, and that we believe in the work, that we have a great culture, number one. And I think continuously improving what we're doing by investing in great technology to ensure that we have a great, all the tools that we need to be successful in the work that we're doing. And also, I think continuously offering retraining opportunities. So as we move through this digital transformation, I think it's imperative that we prepare our workforce proactively for the technology skills that they need to succeed in their jobs. So many times we're using our own employees to lead the digital transformation. And I think we have to proactively train our employees in these technologies in order to advance the digital transformation as rapidly as possible. So those are some of my thoughts.
Very nice. I think it's important. Culture, like you said, is very important for your organizations, especially now. Trying to retain them, I think it's a very important aspect of, you know, doing this business, right? Yeah. Also, I know we are pretty close to the end of our session. I know we have 10 more minutes, but if anyone has any questions, please go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A section that's out there. And me and Maurice are happy to answer any questions that you have.
Yeah, we'd love to answer your questions. So,
also, you know, one thing, you know, as a separate topic, you know, is, you know, we see candidates being candidate engagement aspect. I want to touch a little more about it because I've been spending a lot of time trying to understand what is that's going to touch candidates and why should they come and work with you, right? In terms of that, what are your thoughts on trying to give personalized experience to candidates? Because generally recruiters need to understand the person a little more. It is not about just, you know, picking up the guy and calling, hey, Maurice, are you looking for a job, right? It's about trying to understand Maurice even before I make a call to you. There's like, what does Maurice like? You know, what is he looking for? What makes him get engaged to me? Why would he talk to me, right? Exactly. So those are some key things of personalizing these things before engagement. I think it's very important, especially now, because people have so many opportunities. And why would I want to work with you? You know, I have 10 other roles, you know. So I think that sort of engagement is changing. I want to get some of your thoughts on that and why you think that is important and how can companies get into that and improve that area of their business as well.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I want to cite Amazon. I think it's a really interesting, example of a company that works backwards. They actually think about everything that they're doing from the customer's perspective, right? And so too often as staffing firms, we think about it from our perspective, from inside our organization and how we're going to engage outside with the candidates. But I think what we want to do is work backwards and start with the candidates, start with our employees, start with our customer first, and then work backwards to develop solutions to support these stakeholders and actually put ourselves in the position of what does it feel like to be a candidate? How do we want to be treated as a candidate? What do we want that experience to be like? And then design experiences to support what our candidates want. So I think that's a key insight that I want to share with everybody. And from that point forward, I think we can look at companies like Amazon. We can look at companies that are at the leading edge of digital transformation and see how they are digitally engaging with us, whether it's through emails, whether it's through text messaging. In many cases, it's through mobile applications, and then designing experiences to support that engagement. And I know this is complex. More and more, the marketing function is playing a bigger and bigger role in building these personalized experiences. So it's not just sending it out, it's how are these messages constructed? What do they say? What's the language? And that also plays into your brand for a company, how you express yourself in your messages, how you express yourself through your conversational systems. That all is part of your brand. And I think that's right at the leading edge of where staffing firms are operating right now, is building out that digital identity and that digital brand and those digital experiences.
Agreed. I think there's a lot to do in this area, because I see there are so many solutions that are available, especially on the sales side of things. Engagement with customers, there's a huge lot of tools available, a lot of solutions, but we see a lack of solutions on the candidate side which are well enough advanced, where there will be enough engagement, enough solutions at this point. I'm sure things are going to change over the years, and we see a lot of AI use cases in that area as well.
Yeah, I think AI is going to play a huge role in supporting engagement. What's interesting is that, you know, Amazon uses AI everywhere for personalizing these experiences. And we actually, developers have access to the exact same AI that Amazon is using through Amazon Web Services. But it's a matter of making those investments and building that out in the context of staffing or recruiting that has to be made in the years ahead.
Yes, agreed. So Maurice, I want to get into Q&A. I know we have a few questions here. I'm just going to read them out to you.
Sure.
I think the first question I have here is, if you identify the changing needs of workforce proactively, and the attrition is addressed. So I think the question is, if you identify the changing needs of the workforce proactively, is attrition addressed? Is this a fair assumption? I think the question is, if you're trying to, make sure you provide everything that's needed for your workforce, is your attrition rate going to be low?
I think so. I think you can lower your attrition rate by focusing on the right things, the right culture, the right rewards, ensuring that people feel good about their jobs, feeling like they're progressing. I think that's an important thing. I think the younger generation inherently understands that technology is moving along very quickly and that their jobs could be obsoleted. So they know that they need to continuously advance their skills. So I think it's important that we support that and that we reward individuals for for developing and becoming more valuable. So there's no question in my mind. I see this all the time. There's huge differences in staffing firms in terms of how long recruiters remain on their jobs. I've seen some staffing firms with very short shelf lives or very short periods of time that recruiters stay on their jobs, and other firms where they have long tenure on assignments. And it all has to do with all these factors: the compensation, the culture, skills development, feeling of being successful, etc.
Right. Agreed. Also, I think the next question I have for you here is, any tips for hiring in education industry?
Oh, that's a huge question. I mean, education industry could range from online education, instructional design.
So I guess the question is, how do you hire for education industry? Maybe teachers, and hiring workforce in this sector is also pretty challenging these days. And I see that too, because a lot of you're not having, especially a challenge that I look at, for the next generation, is having enough good teachers. There's lack of good education problems is where we see that. But any tips on that?
I see. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think that, if you're talking about, say, K through 12 education, finding teachers is a massive challenge, because those positions are not very well compensated oftentimes. And number two, we're dealing with COVID right now, and concerns around COVID, and we have a lot of teachers that are retiring right now. So I don't necessarily have any tips other than to say, in general, in recruiting, if it was easy, anybody could do it, and they wouldn't need us to support them. So we have to be the experts in being able to locate these people. So It's like any other area of recruiting. It's understanding how to find these people and how to attract them into positions.
Agreed. Yes. Also, I think the next question I have here is, what are considered important in terms of matching a candidate to a job?
Mm-hmm. That's another very, very big question. And of course, it's I think it really starts with understanding the job and understanding the job as well as the hiring manager, even the manager would. And in some cases, even managers don't necessarily understand the job as well as they need to understand it. So to the extent that we can talk to the hiring manager and ask them what the performance expectations of the job are, how you're going to measure performance, I think, and the deliverables associated with that position, I think is extremely important. But too often we're abstracted from that. We're working through MSP systems and we see a description, a written description that is generic, and it's super hard sometimes to get that understanding of the job. So I think the closer we are to the job and the performance expectations, the more likely we'll be able to find candidates that have past experience that aligns with that. Also, being able to do skills testing in every area of hiring, whether you're hiring commercial or whether you're hiring highly professional people, being able to assess their skills. We have better and better technology now for doing that, especially within IT. We have very sophisticated systems now for pre-screening candidates and assessing their skill levels in different areas of technology. So I think that the skills testing is an area where we're going to see a lot of advancements in the next few years to ensure that we're finding the right candidates.
Very good. I think the next question, I probably know the answer, but I'm going to ask you, what are some of the best AI products for recruiting at this time? You have to tell it's us, Maurice.
Of course. Yeah, so you guys have made a significant investment in AI directly within the ATS, and I think that's fantastic. I think the other area where a lot of companies will talk about AI, but where we're really seeing actual AI in play right now is within conversational systems. Microsoft has an entire API set for supporting conversational systems that companies can tie into, and they can build very sophisticated conversational systems off of that API. So we're going to see a lot of development in that area very quickly, and that's core to how staffing firms operate.
Great. So I was just joking, but I think it's very important, especially when you look at AI products that are there for recruiting. There are different points where we need to look at, right? Is it the point of candidate engagement? Is it the point of, data, managing your data? Is it the point of managing your candidates? There are different points where there are different products that are available. And the most important thing that I personally feel is there cannot be one solution. There can be mix of multiple platforms that you can use for different activities, and try to build up your whole process that would be more effective. I think that is the way I would take it forward, is coming up with a process, a set of tools that are available, analyzing what are pros and cons in each, and try to make sure you fill those gaps in. I think that's probably where I would look at right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's recruiting and staffing is an amalgam of many different technologies, and some will have a small amount of AI, some will have a large amount of AI. It's not like you can go off and buy an AI, right? It's something that's built within a particular system or a particular solution. So it's another technology. And again, this rule-based automation, robotic process automation combined with AI is really the future of a lot of automation and advancement that we're going to see in the years ahead.
Okay, very good. And I have one last question here is, how can empathy and AI coexist? Can you say some example use cases on their coexistence? I think it's a very important question.
It's a really interesting question. I appreciate that very much. I think that they can absolutely coexist. I mean, we have bots now, AI-based bots that can basically listen to people almost like a therapist. and to show empathy. We can train bots and AI to show empathy. There's no question about that. And so I think that you're going to see more and more of that within these conversational systems as they're built out in this decade. So yeah, that's a really great point. I love that.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. Good. Again, thanks. I think we are at on time, Maurice. Again, I want to thank you for taking time to talk to us. It's
Sure, thanks for having me.
Really pleasure talking to you. I'm sure our listeners have learned a lot about, a lot of new things here. Again, I look forward to talking to you soon. Again, thanks for your time, Maurice.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.